Good evening and welcome to the studio this evening. And on tonight's every time I want to do that, it just well, we're going to continue as before with this owl. Try and get something of the face shape of the owl, which I will do better with if I look at with glasses I can see through. One of these days I'm going to get myself a head visor with magnifying lenses, I think, so that I can see better what I'm doing. It's not so bad for carving, but things like the jewellery or actually the scraper board as well, where I want to get to fine detail. Right, so pick a chisel, any chisel as long as it's that chisel. You know, I know that's still not right. Actually, it's not as bad as I thought it was. Okay, well, let's be a little drastic. So the eye's about there. Yeah, that's about right. That ought to be done with a straight chisel. And this one around here, actually, it probably still also wants to be done with a straight chisel as well, but so I'm focused on getting the face shape right. And in the right place for that matter. Okay. So I was just checking out then another photograph I've got of this eagle owl to see just where the beak is in relation to the rest of the face. And as I was expecting, there's quite a dip. Now that chisel's too wide, so we'll need to go to a deeper gouge. Okay. So mainly that actually goes backwards across the head, not out to the side more. So I'm going to bring that picture around there like that so I can see what I'm doing. So we'll adjust this bit of the head in order to take account of that. It's always a good idea if you have a reference picture, if you can have more than one reference picture at different angles or different positions. So I've got one, my main reference picture is the owl looking straight at you like this, but I also have one with its head looking that way, so I can see the profile of the head, which helps enormously understand the shapes involved. So this bird kind of looks like he's doing a Spock. She is doing a Spock impression. And she's got one eyebrow. Can't do it now. One eyebrow raised quite a bit. Come on, what? Start playing games. Talking to the wood while you're doing it helps the carving process. It does nothing for the wood, but it helps you be a little bit more calm about what you're doing. Green direction is going to be a real problem. Well, it is a real problem. It's not going to be a real problem. It is a real problem. It's a real problem given that it's real. It's actually happening. Trying to work out how yeah, it is sort of like that, and then okay, like that, and right, okay, working out how this works. Yeah, and that just goes straight. Okay, yeah. Okay. So that actually is quite a sharp, right. I do tend to talk to myself a little bit in sort of semi-code, as I was doing there. I'm sort of talking to myself internally and answering myself externally. And I'm kind of just telling myself where the curves are, where the transitions are. Because we're kind of looking at the right, and that's quite, yeah. So this is roughly where I start to either make this or ruin it. and either are just as likely actually. And the awkward thing is remembering this is compressed, so the proportions aren't actually correct, it's squashed, which does mean things will look slightly differently to what they should. And in actual fact that shouldn't really be there. So always having to think in 3 dimensions despite working from a 2-dimensional drawing. You translate in 2 dimensions into 3 dimensions, and sometimes that can be really hard to do. You are partially relying on things that you know, and you shouldn't really carve what you know, you should carve what you see. But when you're using a 2-dimensional picture, carving what you see is really awkward. You've got to have another picture to work out where the angles are. And then we said, which, as I say, this is compressed, so the angles change when you do that, which also makes things a little bit of a challenge. And this chisel's the wrong one for doing what I'm doing there. And that's quite abrupt, that's quite soft. So switch chisels. Yeah, because same with the eye. Yeah. I'm sort of keep doing bits all over the place. I keep adjusting the shapes. Sometimes, like here, I want an angle here, but I've got to bring that down into the body. Because the body joins on, of course, to the head. It'd be rather strange if it didn't, but the lines have to continue through. So sometimes, like a minor change here on the head would dictate recarving some of this around here, and I've got a big bump there. Actually, that's the wrong chisel to do it with, but never mind. Wherever you can, use the largest chisel that you can to do something, because you get a better result from it. You get less sort of nicks or small tiny gouges with a larger chisel than you do with little tiny ones. So this one's not too bad, but the smaller chisels create lines like you can see here. The bigger chisels will smooth it out somewhat. That's going to crack off. I can feel that the wood is going to split if I push too hard along here. So I'm looking to try and find an alternative way of just cutting that without the wood splitting. So I'm doing something I don't often do, especially with the gouges, and that is I'm rotating the blade so it actually slices like a knife rather than cuts like a chisel. Because I'm slicing, I'm putting no pressure on the wood, I'm cutting through the fibres, so it's less likely to split. I thought I'd enjoy one of the things when I've been carving before. I've kind of always had a wood grain at an odd angle across the piece. It's always been sort of thought it would be nice to try with wood grain that runs up and down the piece so it looks correct. And when you're carving with it at an odd angle, you sort of cut along. Well, it sort of feels like it ought to be a good idea to cut along the grain. Now that I'm actually doing it, I wish I wasn't. It's not easier, it's harder. All along here, all of this bit, quite a lot of the body, every time I'm cutting this direction or even this direction, I'm always thinking and looking for the wood starting to split, because small bits it just splits and runs, and you then sort of destroy the surface you've just maybe spent 10 minutes trying to create. And it's things like there's a split occurred here and I've got a rough bit of wood. I'm going to have to sort of work out how to get rid of that. Nope, that's split. Eek. Now, because that's split, I'm going to have to do something to take account of the fact that the piece of wood that I'd want it to leave has now gone. Which probably means lowering the face a little bit. So I've chickened out of doing that for the minute. I'm going back to this side of the face. Now, I'm actually having to do quite a lot of what I would normally describe as detail carving here. I really should be establishing shapes, but I'm actually finding it quite difficult. Partly it's just inexperience. So I'm taking my time. I'm doing details that I know I'm going to have to cut through and do again. So I am slightly wasting time, but whilst I'm wasting time in doing it, I probably wouldn't be able to do it without doing it. So it's not exactly wasting time, but it's somebody with more experience, shall we say, would avoid doing it. Media player, why do you just decide to crash for no apparent reason? Okay, let me go back to that. And we'll play it again. Twitch, why do you think my stream is offline? That's better. Thank you, Twitch. I've had that happen quite a few times just recently, where Twitch for some reason decides my stream is offline and doesn't play it basically. And so anybody coming to the stream just sees me as being offline, even though I'm broadcasting. The last time it happened, the only way to stop it, well, to fix it was to actually bounce the stream, to actually stop the stream and start again. So I'm doing here is I'm kind of doing this as though I'm not going to cut the eye out yet. So I'm kind of carving this so that the top of the eyeball is level with the bit I'm cutting, and then I'll cut into the wood for the rest of the eye and the eye socket. So I'm trying to get the face shape such that I know where the eye centre is going to be, the height, and then everything else around it will be carved around it. So taking this really sort of steady. Probably I'm in no hurry anyway, and not trying to do any speed records with this. If I was, I wouldn't succeed, but I'm not even trying for a personal best. Well, I suppose technically I am, because this will be the first time I've ever carved an eagle owl, and therefore whatever time I get for carving this will be a personal best. But it's always a lot easier to carve a subject you have done before or are familiar with. And I didn't get quite that up close and personal with this particular bird. I understand it didn't care for men, shall we say? So I did tend to stay back a little bit. She got a bit nervous if you got a bit too close. It's quite a beautiful looking bird, so didn't really want to upset it. She didn't mind being photographed though. Not quite sure. You can make up all sorts of comments around that, but so I have quite a lot of photographs taken of her, and I'll probably as well as carving, what I may end up doing as well is doing something like scraper board, or well, yeah, scraper board probably. Picture of her at some point. The feather markings on this owl look like they'd lend themselves to being done in scraper board quite nicely, because they've got like a black and white mottled pattern. If scraper board is something that you've just heard me mention and have no idea what it is, it's actually, well, it's a backing material which has been covered with porcelain clay and rolled smooth, and then coated with a layer of black Indian ink. Indian ink is quite robust ink. It's quite a thickish sort of ink when it goes on, and once it's dry, and I buy these already made, what you do then is you scrape away the ink, revealing underneath the porcelain clay, which is white, so you get a black and white image. And to create grey, you make either wider marks, well, so you choose the amount of how white something looks by the wider it is, the more white it looks, or the more lines in a particular area, the whiter it looks. So cross hatching is a technique. The more lines, the brighter it looks. It's very akin to the old newspaper dots, small dots, lots of small dots spread out were quite white because the paper was white. Larger dots closer together made it look black, and you could create a grayscale like that. You can sort of do the same thing with scraper board. And if you're looking at the photographs on the left hand side here, at some point you'll see a couple of scraper board images that come up, both of which have been done on stream. One will be of a cottage, and I think the leopard's there as well. Cottage at night with green grass around it, which was is ink painted on afterwards. But that's an example of scraper board. You will also see on the left hand side there some of the other crafts that I do as well. There's punch craft, which is kind of like a miniature rug making. In fact, it's made like rugs using a needle technique. And you'll see pyrography there. That's the brown looking images done using a heated tool. It's often described as wood burning, but you don't generally burn the wood. It's more akin to cooking it, and you cook it. The more you cook it, the darker it gets. The other so carving, you should see carved pieces there as well. What's the other one? But most of the images are of jewellery, and that's principally just because the jewellery is quicker to make. I'd like to spend about the same amount of time doing each craft. Now, carving, pyrography, scraper board, somewhere between 10 and 30 hours to do a piece. Whereas jewellery, one of those bracelets will take about an hour. So if I spend about the same amount of time, I can do 30 bracelets in the time to do a carving. So there's more of them. But as it happens, also any of those jewellery items are for sale as well. You can take a look at them on Etsy, so zaragonart.etsy.com, and they are there available if you would like to support the stream by buying any of them. Okay, that's starting to look like the shape I want. Possibly want it to go a bit deeper. I'm looking for quite a deep eye ridge around here and down the side of the beak. And I'm going to be looking for the same on the other side as well. So I'm exaggerating the, or rather I'm under exaggerating the curve here at the moment. There should be quite a steep curve back because whilst when an owl looks at you, its eyes look to be straight out the front. They're actually sort of quite angled, so they can see sideways a lot better. Certainly see sideways a lot better than we can. Now I can't, and I don't want to do the same angle here because this is, as I mentioned earlier, this is a compressed relief carving. Often compresses things, squashes them in this direction as though you squashed it down. So some of the angles are, and then just not what they should be, but part of this is making it look like they're correct. So I'm kind of just carving this until I sort of go, that looks about right. Okay, that then comes up there. Let me switch to a straight chisel to do, or try and do that. Whilst you can carve with just 3 chisels, or even 2 actually, the extra chisels quite often just give you more flexibility to do things. So from the point of view of carving, you need a flat chisel, somewhat like what I'm using here. Whilst the larger chisels are immensely helpful, and you should tend to always try and use the largest chisel you can, this little one gets into a lot of spaces that the big one can't, or the bigger ones can't. I wouldn't be able to do this with a bigger chisel. So it's a good start chisel is this one. What's that, about 1/4 inch, something like that. And then a gouge, a small gouge, U-shaped gouge. Something like one of these two, either one. Probably this one is a little bit more useful to start with, so those two as starting points. If anybody's interested in carving, you can kind of start with just those two, a U-gouge and a flat chisel. That's kind of a second, it's quite a shallow U is this, so it's kind of a second or a third. You know, if you're going for a third chisel, your next after the third chisel will be a V-shaped one like this. So these, as a set of 3, these would be your starting chisels. A flat chisel about 1/4 inch wide. This is a U-shaped gouge, quite a shallow one, but it's got quite a spoon on it, which is very helpful. That's probably about 1/3 inch wide, just slightly larger than the 1/4 inch. And then a V-shaped gouge, Very good for tight edges, corners. Also for creating marker lines and actual sort of lines on a piece of work, like I might outline the feathers, for example, using a V-gouge. So those are probably the best three. If anybody's interested in these, these particular ones are made by a company in America called Flex Cut. They're really nice chisels. Having said that, I've never tried any others. Any other proper chisels, that is. And one thing, these aren't cheap, but they, like a number of tools, they are worth the expense of them. I know you often as a beginner you might be tempted to go for cheap tools. Chisels, not necessarily a good idea. Depends on what your definition of cheap is, and just whether you're talking about brand new cheap or second hand cheap. The key thing about chisels is getting them sharp, really sharp. Some of the really cheap chisels that you can get aren't, and are really difficult to sharpen, and then work out to be a false saving, shall we say, because you end up having to get better ones anyway. Now these blades on their own, to buy in the UK anyway, anything between about £12 and £15 each. Then you need a handle. But FlexCut, I know, do sell kits of chisels, so you can get a kit with 3 in, and a kit with about 10 in, and a kit with about 20 in, obviously depending on how keen you are and the amount of money you happen to have spare to buy these sorts of things. But you can always add. Anybody who doesn't add chisels to their collection probably isn't carving. Whether having added the chisel you ever actually use it, that's another matter, but you tend to buy chisels thinking they're going to be really useful to you for some particular circumstance, and then either rarely come across that circumstance again, or you find out they weren't actually as good as they appeared to be. At this moment in time, what I kind of would like is a flat chisel which is spoon shaped, because this here I'm trying to go in and come back out again on a curve, and it's really hard to do, and I keep creating little slivers of wood which I'm just trying to get rid of, which of course is kind of pointless at this stage because I'm still rough carving. So I'm being a little bit just sort of pedantic about chasing these down, and I'm using totally the wrong tool. I should be going to a spoon gouge and working across the cut. But what I was trying to do there is get that feather ridge. I probably want to carve that more backwards. Off the top of the head now. What I'm going to do is try and keep that ridge, but just smooth it backwards into like a curve over the top of the head. I think I've had enough of doing this for tonight. My neck's aching a little bit from looking over this. That's funny actually, I was just thinking then, one of the things I was shopping this afternoon, one of the things we saw whilst out shopping was a standing sitting desk. It's a desk that you can raise and lower, so you can stand up at it and work and sit down at it and work. It's always I understand, it's a good idea to stand up and sit down during the day if you're working on a computer or whatever at a desk, just so that you get blood flow from standing and exercising your legs and things like that. But one of the other advantages of it is when you stood up, you stand in a different position when you're looking down on things, rather than leaning over the desk sat down. Use a different set of muscles, and my neck is starting to hurt at the moment from leaning over and looking at these, so I'm going to stop before it does hurt, for the rest of the weekend, and come back to doing some more of this to try and shape this side of the face a little bit more. But I'm getting a shape that I'm starting to like the look of. It's still not right, but I'm starting to like the look of it, and we'll carry on from there. So I'm going to just say to everybody a reminder that there's my website there on the left hand side of the screen, zaragonart.com, and whilst there is a small shop on there that does have some of the jewellery items in it, if you'd like to take a look at the jewellery items, they are available to buy in the shop, zaragonart.etsy.com. Take a look. I think there are some really nice pieces there, as well as reasonable prices, and I think there's some really pretty pieces, great for Mother's Day coming up shortly within the next couple of weeks, or just as a general present. Nice. They do make nice presents to some of those bracelets, well, all of those bracelets and necklaces and things like that. So I recommend you take a look. The other two sites there, of course, YouTube. Unfortunately, I don't have a nice, pretty YouTube URL just yet. They need to have more followers before they'll let me have one of those. So if you feel so inclined, do a search on YouTube for Zaragonart Studio, and you should find, I think there's 2 or 3 time-lapse films on there at the moment. There will be some more of some of the items being made, so take a look there, click follow on there. More people I get, the sooner it'll be I can get a nice lovely URL to use for that. The other one, of course, Twitter at Zaragonart. I do tweet when I go live, as well as occasions when I'm unable to do so. I do generally try and tweet as well, so that you know and don't need to come to the stream. And of course, follow me here on Twitch when it works, and it gives you notice when I go live. On the other hand, hopefully I'll be on tomorrow night from around 8 PM UK time, 2000 hours UTC GMT. Thanks for watching, everybody. I'm going to rest my neck, and hopefully I'll see you all in the studio again tomorrow. Bye for now.